guy, and he's defying David, he's defying Israel, the army, but David didn't see that. What David saw was that he was defying the God of the armies of Israel. And David hears that, and he's like, that shouldn't be. And he walks up to somebody and he says, what would be done for the man that takes that embarrassment out? And so they begin to tell him. They said, well, he would receive the king's daughter as his wife. And not only that, but his family would be free in Israel. Now think about this. How many of you might be motivated to go up against a Goliath if you knew you wouldn't have to pay any taxes the rest of your life? Craig's like, sign me up. Let me add. Free in Israel. Now, free, the word free there is one that really indicates the difference between a slave and a free person. But you remember when Samuel told them all the different things that a king would do? He would take their sons and their daughters, and he would take the daughters to be cooks, and he would take their lands and take their sons to be in his army. Well, it could be that they were free from that. It doesn't seem that Saul had established any kind of a taxation system yet, but it could also be free from taxation too. But you'll notice that David goes from one to another asking questions. And that brings me to another life application point, and that is this. Faith doesn't leap before it looks. It looks, then leaps. And David looked. He got information. He got information from a bunch of different people, and then his family got involved. His big brother. What do you think you're doing? You smart alecky little arrogant kid, you. Who'd you leave your few sheep with? Huh? Oh, you just came out here to get a piece of the action, that's all. And David's like, can't I even talk to these guys? And he turns away from him and goes to somebody else and asks the same question. Now, that's important because we have to resist the urge to listen to negative people like his brother. I've heard some people say this, and I don't know if I feel this completely, but I'm close. If you have a negative person that's not a family member, and every time you get around this person, they're Debbie Downer. Everything's bad, everything's discouraging, and you just feel so weighted down when you leave them, and you feel so hopeless, and you feel like nothing's worth trying. And, it's like the old saying, nobody loves me, everybody hates me, I guess I'll go eat worms. If you've got somebody like that in your life, get them out. You don't need that. Now, if it's a family member, whole different ballgame. Because you can't just turn away from family members. Although you can limit the influence as much as you can. You have a responsibility to God, who has a plan for your situation, and you have the responsibility to keep your thoughts in captivity to the obedience of Christ, according to Corinthians. And if that person is planting thoughts in your mind and you're unable to counteract that, put a little distance there. Now, what about a situation where you can't put distance there? Because sometimes we face those situations. In that kind of a situation, you've got to be very, very mentally active when you're in a conversation with this person. And when they start saying things to you like, well, that'll never happen. Sometimes if you say something out loud, you don't like the kind of reaction you get, okay? But in your mind, you can say, that's not so when God's involved. That's not the case. I believe. I see it differently. And just don't let those, you see, thoughts from other people don't have an effect on you unless you let them become embedded within you and you begin to believe them. That's when they're dangerous. And so be very careful with negative people. Now, so finally, Saul hears about it. And that's why David did it. He kept talking because he wanted Saul to hear it. Because he's like, you know what? I can do this. Now, that wasn't just... It was faith. It was faith, the kind of faith that Jonathan had. It was pure faith. But David also knew something. He knew that he had a skill that could take that guy out quickly. Because you see, if you look back in the book of Judges, there's a mention of 700 Benjamites who were left-handed, who could sling a stone. Now this is what Scripture says. Could sling a stone at a hair and hit it. David had a skill which was the equivalent of being a sniper in our world. And Goliath only had one area which, depending on the kind of helmet that he had, was either a very small area, might have even just been his eyes or in between his eyes. The helmet would have covered everything. And either as he pulled it back to kind of laugh at David, or it had an opening here, but everything else was protected. I mean, a sword's not going to get you in between here, you know? Because not with this big guy. He's got a shield, you know, and got a sword. He's got a javelin. He's got a spear. That's not going to get you. No. Everything else is all protected. And so David knew that he had this skill, but he also felt this inner urging from God. And he knew that his God was being blasphemed by this pagan. And so I think it's really important for us to remember, whenever we're fighting a battle, to remember that the victory is going to come through God alone, not through us. And if we try to fight the battle, we're going to mess it up. David talks to Saul, and Saul says, you can't do this. You're just a boy. You're just a youth. And he's been a fighting man since his youth. David's like, you know what, King? Lion came and took one of my dad's sheep. I didn't just let it go. I chased that thing down and I killed it. And a bear took one, and I chased it down and I killed it too. And the same God that helped me kill the lion and the bear will do the same thing to that Philistine. And there was such confidence in what David said, and Saul thought, okay, maybe this is my out. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? At least this 40-day waiting game's over. You know, there's going to be movement of some kind. And so he says, all right, let me suit you up. So he takes his coat of mail and he puts it on David. Now remember how big Saul was. He's head and shoulders taller than every other Israelite. David is a youth. He's probably shorter than most Israelites. He puts this thing on. He takes a hold of Saul's sword and he's like, Saul, he said, I can't do this. So he takes it off. Now maybe David had in his mind that Goliath was not going to be able to move very quickly, and David wouldn't be able to move quickly, and he needed to move quickly because maybe he had seen that the guy was a little slow. I don't know. But he's like, you know what? I'm just going to go like I know to go. So he dresses like a shepherd boy. And he goes down to that stream in the middle, and he picks up 5 stones. Now, some people have said, okay, if David had so much faith, why did he take 5 stones? Easy. Goliath had 4 brothers. He wanted to be ready for all of them. In case, because I mean, what if he takes down the one and one of the other big ones is like, whoa! And he comes at it, David just takes another, takes him out, you know. He was ready. Now, it didn't happen till, you know, he takes on one of them later, and you'll find out toward the end of 2 Samuel, I think it is. You'll hear about the battle, and one of his men takes out one of the brothers of Goliath. But David was prepared. You can't be somebody else and win God's battles. You got to be yourself. God made you who you are. Don't want to be anybody else. Don't try to be anybody else. David had to be himself. And so he goes into battle, and he kept it simple. He had 5 stones, a sling, and faith. And more faith than anything else. And so he stands up from the stream, and by this time, the giant has noticed that he's down there, and David starts running toward him through the field, and he begins to be offended. What are you, a kid? I am a warrior. Do you think I'm a dog or something? You got a stone, you got a staff? Come on, I'm going to break you up and feed you to the birds. David said, you come to me with a sword and with a javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord. And by the way, today he's going to give me to you. I'm going to cut your head off. And your carcasses are going to be fed to the birds. Because of God. And David, sniper goes into effect. Now, I got to ask you this question. Do you know what the last thought was that Goliath had?
This is going to hurt.
That never entered my mind before.
Come on, doctor.
So the guy comes down, and maybe the Israelites, they're wondering what's going on, and they're kind of watching, and the Philistines are thinking, maybe. I've seen him do this before. He's going to wait until he's up close to him. He's going to grab him. He's going to just break him in pieces. David walks up to him, pulls that helmet off, pulls his hair out of the way, and then he picks that big, huge sword of Goliath's up, and he proceeds to hack his head off. Gross. And he grabs that stinky head, and he turns toward the Philistine.